so much for joining me today. We are going to dive into the conversation in a moment. First, I wanted to remind you that the show notes and links mentioned on this podcast are on my website at lizasivekmarketing.com. That's Liza with a Z and Civic with an S. So, okay, let's get started.
Hello, magicians. And it's so ironic that I'm saying that today because I have an actual magician here, not a marketing magician, but well, he is that too. That's why he's here. But an actual magician and an expert at sleight at hand. So in my great marketing genius, I decided to do an audio podcast with him, because that makes sense. So actually, we are going to get a couple of videos at the end so that you guys can see how amazing he is. This is Dan Chan out of San Francisco, and I'm really excited to talk to this guy. You are just so charismatic, and I've been watching your trailers on LinkedIn and watching your website, and it's really, really exciting to have you on here. So thank you. So Dan,
thanks for having me.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a busy day. I just finished a virtual show, and I'm just been on Zoom all last year, it seems. I did over 400 shows.
400 shows on Zoom.
400 shows since March of last year. That's probably over, average a show a day. In December, I did 52 shows in a week and 12 shows in a day.
Your hands must be tired. You must be very tired. Wow. And talk about pivoting to be able to go from, what would be considered traditionally only a live show thing to be able to pivot so well to Zoom. That's fantastic. I don't know that everyone could do that. So what made you come to the idea that you could do that pivot and do it well?
I was just looking to pick up a little bit of cash and wait this out. But then when I started doing this, I realized that I had one or two really great effects. And I was like, hey, I could get some massive PR with this. So I pitched a CNBC and they featured me. Then The Hustle, then Business Insider. I've been on CNBC twice and Business Insider 3 times since March of last year.
Wow. That's fantastic. And I think a lot of us have had to come up with creative ways to pivot. And this is one of the best stories I've heard because, again, the average person would not think, oh, well, let me just, go to Zoom. Let me just go on the news. Let me just go on Business Insider. So that was one of the things that really attracted me to your story when we talked, because you have marketed yourself differently than other magicians might have. So tell me how you came into magic first, how you came into this role as a magician, and we'll talk a little bit about how you marketed yourself and your corporate events.
Yeah, I first went to a magic shop on 9th and Irving, and as a kid, you get these kits. But for me, it was all about the live experience. When I saw a magician live, it changes everything. When you watch something on YouTube, it can hook you, but usually before you get down this rabbit trail that people get dragged on, especially guys, for some reason, we're wired that way. We want to figure everything out and we want to challenge authority. So at that time, I saw something and I was a bad spectator. I heckled the magician. I think because I probably was a loudmouth, he did this trick where he threw balls over my head, which is called paper balls over the head, which is a routine I somewhat do occasionally when I get heckled. But everyone sees what's going on except for the guy sitting in the hot seat. And that's the best way to shut someone up is you steal their watch from the wrist, or you do something where you embarrass them a little bit. Everyone is having fun, but everyone realizes, oh man, this guy got picked on because someone was being a little bit loud or obnoxious. And that's when I pull that one super power tool out, because most people get into magic because they love the magic, but they quit when they realize it's either hard or when they can't handle the pressure of someone saying, oh, I know how it works. And half the time people do know how it works. Especially when you're a beginner. Now, most of my tricks are bulletproof where no one can figure anything out. And that's the goal. End goal is to keep you wowed and amazed.
That's right. And I have always enjoyed watching magic shows, and you're right. There does seem to be a draw to men who want to figure things out, including people who want to heckle you and say, "I understand," but if you ask them to do it, I bet they couldn't. And it's an art form. I mean, there's a real skill to being able to do illusions, and especially sleight of hand and close work. And I'm talking from
Even
a
if you
layman's perspective.
even if you know how the trick works, the question is, can you do it?
Yeah.
And even if you know part of it, there's probably 90% you don't even know, and you think you know it, and then you don't even know how much work is involved in doing it.
Right. I can't even pull a quarter out of a little kid's ear. So, and they're an easy audience. So I have a lot of respect for what you do.
So I see that we were talking about magic, myth, and marketing, and I Googled that, and I actually found out that there's a book on that. But the magic part we're going to show you later, and and everyone out listening, you'll have to go to the YouTube channel to see the demonstration of what we're doing here. But I want to talk about the myth. And really, it's the story, because all these things that I'm telling people are actually true in my show. For example, I perform for lots of billionaires. I perform the three shell game, which is a game where people have lost thousands of dollars. In fact, when I started doing the three shell games, I asked them during my dinner show, has anyone played this? And then I said, out of curiosity, how much money did you lose? And then
Mm,
someone told me they lost $1,600. Another person lost $2,000. And these
wow.
aren't myths, but these are stories that I can tell the truth. Like, I've actually pickpocketed police officers. I hacked into people's iPhones. So BuzzFeed did a feature article on me in 2016. I snuck a reporter into a big party, and he was my sound guy, and he saw me do some incredible things. And then he asked me, can you go into BuzzFeed's offices? And hopefully we can share that in our show notes. Did you get a chance to see that BuzzFeed article?
I did read it. Yes, I
Okay.
did. And tell my listeners about it because they will definitely want to read it. We will definitely put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it went semi-viral. There was a video that accompanied it, and I'm hacking into iPhones, but I'm doing a lot of things with iPhones and smartphones, which really differentiated me in the Silicon Valley culture. And then I started performing for billionaires, and went to Germany, Shanghai, Las Vegas, and Japan 4 times. And that's where everything becomes the myth and legendary. Because when they said, "Oh, like, no way can you steal a watch off my wrist," and I actually started doing challenges. People at parties would say, "Hey, steal this guy's watch. Go do this," and I would be like, "I'll try it." And then I started doing it with people knowing I'm a pickpocket. And when that happened, I started getting a lot more confident. And that was one of the cool things about pickpocketing is you create a legendary myth. Because
Yes,
people tell
yes.
that
And that's
people retell your
marketing right
story, and you
there.
want to empower them to retell your story again and again.
And for me, marketing myths in my podcast is things that people believe that are not true. But for you, you're saying build yourself up as a legend, become a mythological creature, and people will want to see what you can do. And I like that. I like that attitude.
I was disappointed when I finally saw some of my mentors, and I realized that the stories that they were telling were fake.
Oh,
Like, people talking about this magic, oh, my uncle or my grandfather showed me something. And I love a lot of the stories, but I just said I couldn't tell a fake story again and again. I could retell a story about me getting out of a speeding ticket by showing an officer this effect where I change $1 bills into $100 bills, five $1 bills into five $100 bills. And I retell that story, but I can tell it with that same enthusiasm. But I used to tell these cheesy stories, and I'm like, ugh. But I was like, this is not me, and I don't like telling this fake story. So I just started saying, what's legendary? So I started doing things that were interesting about skydiving and bungee jumping and windsurf. I was a windsurfing and sailing instructor. And then I ate a salmon heart while it was still beating
oof.
as a kid, but I didn't care about the myth part because I wasn't thinking of that. But when I started doing this effect in my show, people said, "Dan, what if I was thinking to myself, a lot of people copy in this magic circle. So I said, what are things people couldn't copy? So I said, this story I integrated into this effect called yes, no, get to know. Because when we do a lot of corporate team building, I ask people, what's the most dangerous thing you've ever done? Or what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done? Go ahead and put that in the chat bar now. Then I ask them, would you ever eat? Well, the first thing is, would you ever go bungee jumping? Would you go skydiving? Would you eat a rattlesnake? Which I've done. And would you eat a salmon heart while still beating? So all these things are incorporated in the show. I ask people to vote thumbs up or thumbs down if they think that their coworker would do so, right? And now it gets people like engaging, like, oh, he's got the guy who said he would eat a salmon heart. And then I incorporate lessons about leadership, because I say, as a leader, I've been told never to ask your people to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. In fact, I've done all these things, and I ask these questions, and now people get to know me during this show. They're like, oh, we know Dan, he's done these weird things. He's the only magician who's done all these things. And then they get connected to me because, you might spearfish, or you might be the vegetarian, but that's the guy. And I can be that guy because I can ask you questions that you normally couldn't ask your coworker a little bit, like bungee jumping, or I take it to that level where it's kind of like that part where it feels like a little bit more dramatic theater.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
thinking you walk into the lunchroom and you ask somebody, so would you eat a still beating salmon heart? That's going to get you written up in HR. So yeah, you're definitely going to want Dan to come in and do that team building and not do it on your own. And I love that. I love that that gets people thinking and gets you to remember it, because stories have to be authentic to connect.
yeah, and then the question is, when they say yet no, I said, so how much would it take for you to eat the salmon heart? Then when they say, $50,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, some people say, oh, you'd have to pay me $1 million because I'm vegetarian. Well, then I say, when I make $1 million, let's go fishing. And I joke with them that, but they're all, so the next time they ever go fishing, or when they ever get their own fish, they're gonna think that. And
Right.
then
Every time you pass the fish department, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you're embedding a memory of who someone is. You want people to think, like, when they think magician, I want them to think Dan Chan. But when they pass the fish aisle, or they go to Whole Foods, or they think of anything, like I incorporate product integration in some of my shows. Like I'll make a Martinelli's apple juice appear from nowhere, or make a dove appear. So there's little things that I embed. In fact, the newest thing in my show, which I'm going to give as a little bit of spoiler just for you, because I've been on a lot of podcasts and I wanted to tell one or two new things every single time. And this is something that I haven't told on any podcast. It's just for your group. I play a video before my show. In the show, I ask people to do name certain things or do certain things. Later on, I replay the video, and embedded inside that video are hypnotic marketing suggestions that make them say or do certain things. And that's the premise. Is I replay the video and I say, did you notice this? And people are like, I didn't notice that, but that's exactly what happened, or that's exactly the word that he made me say. So that is just something that really gets people to a different level, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no way he could have made me think of that.
I have seen that kind of suggestion, and that is some really fascinating psychological stuff. It really is. So that's neat the way you do that. And I know you're also a mind reader, so that's important in marketing, right? So tell me a little bit about your mind reading. Like, how do you do that in your shows?
Well, let me show you a demonstration right now, and this clip will be on your YouTube channel, hopefully, okay?
Yes.
Okay. So your thoughts determine your actions. Your actions determine your habits, and your habits determine your destiny. And that's one of my favorite quotes. So I'd like you to think of a person, a place, or a thing that evokes a positive thought or emotion. What is it that you're thinking of?
My mother.
your mother. Do you know how often people say a mother? What's your mother's name?
Barbara.
Barbara. Now, did we talk about this before the show?
Not
I
at
didn't tell you to
all.
say Barbara or anything, correct?
Not at all.
How amazing would it be if I actually showed you it said Barbara right here, which was in front of you the entire time?
All
Tell
right,
them
we're
what
gonna
they
have
see.
to send this to my mom. That's
And on that card
fantastic.
is Barbara.
On that card is Barbara. All right, so yeah, we're gonna need to hire him for our social media apparently, because he can tell me everything you guys are gonna say and do. So I remember you telling me a little bit about how you were trying to get into some of the magic magazines when you started out, and you kind of changed. And I'm sorry about the dog. Apparently somebody's here, but we've given up on getting the dog to be quiet during podcasts. So that's Duke Skywalker. So if we have a minute for this, let's talk about how you got into Business Insider and CNBC and the other magazines instead of trying to work your way into the magic. And that's how, didn't that lead to some of the corporate gigs?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had certain goals, and one thing is when you miss in certain parts, it makes you work harder in other parts. When you don't get something, it makes you want something. And I wanted to be in Magic Magazine and Juggle Magazine, and I wanted my wife to be in Balloon Magic, and I wanted my son to be in. So we wanted to do all these things, but for some reason, they never featured me. But it made me more hungry, and magicians don't pay my bills. So I'm glad I kind of didn't hit that to some respect, because if you got success early on, sometimes you give up. So I ended up, the first feature when CNBC showed my failure, I lost $8,000, and I'll share that with you here. $8,000, nothing great about losing $8,000, and that's the only thing that was written in the article. And then I got featured in The Hustle, which went into 2 million inboxes. And then I went into Business Insider, and then Wall Street Journal, and then Business Insider again. But I found out how to pitch reporters. And the hook was, I would tell them, I'm a pre-IPO PayPal employee that pivoted to Zoom working as a magician. And I've worked for every one of these companies from A to Z. And that list is a really, really comprehensive list from A to Z. So I worked for Google 40 times, LinkedIn half a dozen times, Netflix, and Oracle. And so many corporations have now pivoted. And these corporations are doing Zoom meetings. And half of them haven't even met each other in real life or in person. But they've met over Zoom. And you need something to connect, because everyone's doing all this work on Zoom. But most of it's boring. And we really get to know people when we break bread with them. And when we have a shared experience, they'll be like, oh, remember when the magician said this or did that? So I feel like those are the moments that connect us when we get together on Zoom and experience a shared collective experience.
I love that. I love that. And I think you're right. It's long before COVID made Zoom the basic way of communicating for businesses. So many of what you're talking about, the Silicon Valley and the corporations were spread out all over the world. They had to do Zoom, right? So you were perfectly poised to walk right into that, and that's a wonderful thing.
And Zoom magic wasn't good, but they were forced to do it. So then it started getting better and better, and within a certain amount of time, people were like, wow, this is great, because we started realizing I don't have to leave home. So this $2,000 corporate event that I was doing before, we could lower the cost to $1,000. And I would not get on an airplane. I wouldn't have to charge them my hotel and food expense and all this other thing. And I started conservatively charging less, but later I started charging over $100 per person for groups, because they're like, oh, you're the best Zoom magician out there. And I'll still work with people. I have 3 packages. I have like Med Talks, which is a spin on TED Talks. So I anchored, people are like, oh, I know what a TED Talk is. it's an engaging thing that really speaks more on an intellectual level versus, oh, comedy magician. So when you get something like that, I also have this thing about marketing that I sometimes slip into some of my shows. But magic, myth, and marketing is memorable because of the alliteration.
Right.
Dan Chan, Magic Man, has a rhyme and alliteration. Dan Chan, Master Magician, sounds better than Dan Chan, Billionaire's Magician. But I finally realized there's a lot of magicians, but I wanted to do the play on those words, and I did Dan Chan, Millionaire's Mentalist. I still advertise
Ooh.
sometimes as others, but I started saying, what makes me even more different? When someone's looking for a magician, I can do the magic, but then I'll show them things that they didn't expect. And mind reading is so much harder than magic to do well and to do engaging. Most people are just listing, oh, if there's, imagine a show where I just knew everything about you. That's kind of boring. So there needs to be texture. So I started creating the show where things start from a 50-50 to more and more impossible to becoming totally impossible. So then they could say, oh, it's a guess, or it's somewhat believable. And we've taken that really to the next level.
So there's really, and I see this reaction all the time on your videos of this, people just going, how did you do that? And just being blown away. And that's the reaction you want to get as a magician. You want to blow them away and make sure that they just are like, I have no idea how you just did that. And they're never going to forget that. And I love watching those
Absolutely.
reactions. Yeah.
It's better than a written a written testimonial or them speaking it. So, unless the testimonial is them energetically talk right after you've done an effect. Those are the perfect times to capture testimonials, when you can feel emotion. And you can tell that I'm really excited about what I'm doing. And you want someone who's excited about it versus the guy who's like, or like, oh, or they believe, a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm looking forward to going back to in person. I'm looking forward to staying virtual. I am really looking to pivoting completely virtual, where I'm charging so much more for my in-person events eventually that people aren't hiring me as much in person. Maybe if you send me to Hyatt or the Ritz-Carlton in Hawaii or New York City, I'll still do those events, but I'm not going to Arizona anymore for these college events that I've done before. I'm going to plan on 10xing it, but now I have walkaway power. And because I have global reach, it allows me to think differently. And most people haven't seen a good Zoom magic show because most of them still are pretty bad. Because I've seen like 50 of them and they suck. Except because I've done so much research and I realized, what didn't I like? What didn't I like? What could make it better? And when you do this in any business, you start realizing things. Like I see this on so many different places. I ask my son, when we go into a store, what's the business model? What's their strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats? And then what's the analysis on Porter's 5 forces, and how would we transfer your business to blue ocean strategy, where you're not competing against people? Most magicians are on the same platforms, fighting for the same gigs. I can be on those platforms, but now I'm on a lot of podcasts. Most magicians probably couldn't get on a lot of podcasts because they didn't figure out what the tie-in is. So with corporations, I've been doing this so many years that I've been tying in people's products to the magic finale, that I started realizing I do it verbally. Like when you said, yours was easy because yours was a slam dunk. Magic, myth, and marketing.
Magic. I mean, how hard did I just handed that to you, Dan. Come on.
Yeah. But then I also said to you, like, I have a tie-in to myth. And then I have a tie into marketing. The myth was, how did I become legendary in Silicon Valley? And how did I perform for billionaires? Because I've performed at the Sun Valley, Idaho conference, where media moguls like Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos goes to every year. In fact, that conference is this week. But I perform for those heads of these companies regularly. So that's the myth. And then the marketing was the alliteration. So if I just said that, It's a sure way in. Same with the way that I craft my LinkedIn pitches. There's different ways that you can flip it so that the journalist will say yes and or open your email. For example, if you've worked at Amazon, even as a driver, you can say, hey, I noticed you wrote something about Amazon on unfair wages or on this, or anytime they come in, you can say, I used to work at Amazon. And you can just work there for a very short period of time. My story was really cool because I was at PayPal and I had stock options. I gave up 3/4 of them, but I still vested. And stock options, if I did the calculation correctly, I would have been worth $5 million because I was one of the, they said less than 200th employee, but I was even before that. I joined PayPal even before Elon Musk. So when I started saying, hey, the guy who worked at PayPal before Elon Musk became a magician, people are like, let me hear more. Like,
Yes.
let me. And in fact, Business Insider wrote I wrote the article, but I pitched it to them. And initially, the reporter was going to write the article, and they're like, well, you wrote most of it. We'll give you the byline. So I actually had my first byline on Business Insider.
Very cool. Very cool. And you know what I love about this particular conversation with you is that you're not just telling us how you market yourself, you're really showing us, you're doing it right now. And I love that. I respect that. You're saying, here's how I do it. And you're as a magician, you shouldn't be showing us so much behind the curtain, but since it's not magic, but marketing, I guess that's okay, right? So you really your personality and your attitude are so positive, and you have a business mind, obviously, and I can see that.
I used to hold all these secrets in, and I said, after performing for Tim Ferriss 4 times, in his book, I started reading it again, and it said, what if I did something different? And I said, what if I started revealing magic tricks? And I tried that for a little bit, and then people wouldn't appreciate it. And I said, well, I do it during private classes. And I got a little backlash, but I said, what if I reveal marketing secrets to both magicians, which would endear me to them? And now I'm the thought leader in some of these communities. When people ask me to join, they're like, oh, you contribute so much. And whenever I have unique insights, like for example, in my investing, I share this investing tip with people. I have a lot of shares of Google. Every time Google's hired me, I bought 1 share. But I asked myself, why is Google so much stronger than Tesla? And I own both, but I'm heavily, heavily weighted toward Google. Anytime a kid clicks on an ad by accident, Google makes money.
Yes.
Anytime someone runs a YouTube ad, anytime someone uploads content and they put a commercial before it, Google makes money on Waze, on everything. They make so much money. They need tax write-offs to keep their ratios down so they don't pay as much in taxes. They have so much money that by the way that they hire magicians and other things and throw parties, they have parties with tigers in their backyards and things like crazy things that that I show on my Facebook fan page. But how hard is it to buy a Tesla? I've been begging my wife to get a Tesla for years. Still don't have that Tesla, but I've clicked on hundreds of ads.
Yeah.
And every time you click on an ad, I make money because I own hundreds of shares of Google. And there's no other business model like that in the world. And I wish I invested a lot earlier. And I wish I started buying shares of stock in every company that hired me. In fact, because I made connections and because I was an early Airbnb host, I participated in an Airbnb IPO, and I was featured in CNBC again to bookend, because I think every story should really have bookends. First story is losing 8,000. Last story is making 15,000 in 1 day on the IPO. And
Wow.
it connects back to PayPal because when they started asking me questions in Business Insider, again, I said, hey, this is my mistake. I sold too early. So this time I sold only 20% of my stock just so that I know that I, doubled on that portion. And then I held the rest because I really don't need the money, but I don't want to be worrying about this roller coaster of up and down of whether Airbnb stock is going up or down every day. So at least I'm not having to track that, and I'm mentally freed up,
Yes. Okay. Okay.
So I created that story, and now like every time I pitch a reporter, I have something else. In LinkedIn, they have a limited number of characters. So you can't give them your full life story unless it's at BuzzFeed and I have a link, or Business Insider. And that's a really cool link. It says hired the magician who's hired by billionaires as part of the URL. When they read that, they're like, oh, I got to click on that. And I don't have to tell them my full story. Now that limitation that LinkedIn has on me is eliminated because they don't want people cold calling or pitching. But if you have something so well wrapped up in that story, when after they click, they want to hear more, then you've got this open rate. So for most people, they can't work LinkedIn like as well unless you have a great hook. And I've worked with people who've hired me to work with them on their hooks, just as a hobby, as a side hustle, because I love working on these angles. So I asked the final thing I'm going to say is, it's a family business. The guy sneezing in the back, that's my son. By age 5, he was juggling 3 balls. By age 8, he was juggling 5 balls. By age 10, he was picking pockets and juggling 3 flaming torches. By age 12, he was on national television twice and on television countless times.
That's amazing. That's
But
great.
I planned that out 10 years out. And I also have a plan, and I might miss certain goals, but I hit those goals with my son because I coached him. I have a plan of getting investors and making a permanent dinner show. That was
Wow.
one of my goals. I also have a plan of building a virtual studio next to my this is my virtual studio. I'm planning on building a physical studio next to that once I move, because I want to go to a place where people will fly to see me. I want to have tricks that are so legendary that people, when they visit the Bay Area, will start talking about it and say, hey, Dan, do you have your pop-up? Can we visit you at your house and see your magic museum? Because I have all
Very
these
cool.
cool things that people would love to see in the backstory of magic. And if people are magic geeks or want to learn more about magic, I also am a member of the Magic Castle, and I'm a member of exclusive magic clubs like the Magic Garage, which is the secret magic club where this guy has a bar and his whole garage has been converted um, into a mini theater. Really nice. And I'm a member of those. So often I bring in a lot of my CEO friends or influencer friends to these special magical places.
That's really cool. And so you're going to do something like that. I'm looking forward to seeing that. It's going to be like Dollywood, but Dan Chan. I got to, make it a whole thing. It's going to be a whole area eventually, right? We're going to have like amusement parks and, let's do it. Let's go for it. All that
I,
investing.
I don't know about that. I wanted to keep it small. I wanted to get enough traction and build. But that is something. If I hit these milestones, I might challenge myself. But I always think about what's the low hanging fruit. What's the thing that I can do next to grab and pull down. And I'll tell you, this podcast thing was part of that strategy. I was really uncomfortable going on podcasts. I hated the way I sounded. But now I'm so comfortable with the way I sound because, one, I've said my thing quite often and I've done it quite often. But believe it or not, I still hate listening to myself on those early podcasts when I started about a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's
We
finding
all do.
safe places to fail. Often, and I want to say, here's the thing that I would love to offer your listeners. I reach out to me via email at millionairesmentalist.com for a free, no obligation demo. I'll show you some of the things that I've done already, but also I beta test new things all the time. I could show you something that you haven't seen before and let you know, and let you experience what virtual magic is truly about anywhere in the world. Now I can show a 5-minute demo and it doesn't cost me anything. I could just do it from my studio right here. And that is what I feel is going to be the next transformation for a lot of magicians, coming online and letting people experiencing, like if you were to go to San Francisco, you think, I live about an hour away from San Francisco. It takes you an hour to drive It costs you $25 to park. You
Mhm.
have to arrive early so you don't get stuck in the traffic and you drive back. Now that's a 4-hour thing. And then for a family of four, if it's a high quality production, you might spend $100 a person. That's $400 for a musical. For a magic show, you can have the same family of four, pay $25, do it from the comfort of their own home, be pleasantly surprised it was way better than it was expected, and see something different. And I believe later, and some magicians are already doing it. I'm charging only $25 per screen, but other magicians are charging $100 per screen. I mean, for my publicly ticketed shows. For corporations, I'm doing these really expensive corporate parties. So before we get off, I think I promised you another magic effect. Yes?
Yes. And then we're going to go through where they can reach you besides that email. So let's go for it.
Yeah, that's my website, millionairesmentalist.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Dan Chan Magic. And I have a lot of what I do here. Liza. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to think of a playing card. Not just any playing card, but the one in front of me right now. Liza.
All right.
Which card do you think it is? It's not the Ace of Spades and it's not the Joker. But what card do you think it is?
I think it's the 3 of Hearts.
How did you know?
It must be osmosis. You're teaching me to mind read.
No, in fact, I actually think that you looked a little bit closer on this and you might have noticed this marking.
Oh, look at that. Look at
3
that.
of Hearts. In fact, right here on the top, there is also a 3 of Hearts.
That is crazy.
That is indeed the 3 of Hearts.
And that's been sitting in front of me for most of this recording. So
no, it was
just
yep.
Subliminally seeing that, huh?
Yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, thank you. We're going to have, of course, everything up on the show notes. We're going to get those articles up on the show notes that you mentioned. Any other links you want to give us?
Well, just Google Business Insight. When you go to millionairesmentalist.com, you're going to see all these links of everything that I'm mentioning. The Business Insider articles, the BuzzFeed articles. So just go to Millionaire's Mentalist or Dan Chan Magic for more of the family stuff. If you're local in the Bay Area, go to Dan Chan Magic because it shows the juggling and my son and my wife's beautiful balloon art. My wife makes life-size balloon sculptures.
Wow. All right. I'm hoping my brother's listening because that's where he is. You listening, Pete? Okay. So awesome. All right. So let me say again, thank you. And we will definitely be putting some videos up on YouTube.
Awesome.
Wow, another fantastic conversation done. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget that all the links mentioned will be in the show notes at lizasivekmarketing.com. And while you're there, if you're a business owner whose marketing is on life support, check out the Your Virtual Marketing Department offer and take the Marketing Health Report quiz for free. For less than the cost of a full-time hire, we can take your marketing from frustrating to lead generating with an entire marketing team. So check that out, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Marketing Myths and Magic, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can find us at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.